Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Open Conversations. I am your host, Ainsley Bowden, and today my guest is none other than Jeff Grubb, who has been around the gaming industry for a long time now with VentureBeat, Gamesbeat, and recently made the move to Giant Bomb. So we talk about his journey to the gaming industry, how he started in games to begin with, what it was like working at Gamesbeat in the late 2000s, early 2010s era, his move to Giant Bomb, how social media has impacted the gaming industry, and a bunch of other things. I hope you enjoy. And we are live with Jeff Grubb. Good afternoon, sir. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. And I know we were chatting offline. I've been trying to coordinate this with you for a little bit. I've been really looking forward to it because I think it's fair to say that you've got a pretty big reputation in the gaming community now, and you obviously have been around for a long time, do a lot of different content. So I've been looking forward to kind of talking through those things, because one of the things I really like to talk with people who have been around for a while in the industry is just how drastically it's changed, right, over the past 10, 15, 20 years, what have you. So yeah, but looking forward to it.
Yeah, so same.
So I think one thing I really like to do is kind of talk about how you got into gaming going back. We're seasoned gaming for a reason. I always joke, I've been gaming a very long time, since the early 80s, with the 2600, ColecoVision, all those things. And just kind of curious around, your path, your journey. What kind of got you into gaming, or what's like your kind of earliest memory of really enjoying a video game?
Yeah, I was on the ColecoVision, and it had the Atari 2600 attachment on there. I was definitely playing that a bit, but really, and I must have taken the games quickly, because for my 5th birthday I got the NES, and that's really what got me in there. And then, my brothers and stuff, like my older brothers, they're like 10 and 12 years older than me. They helped make sure they could get it for themselves as well. But it was like my birthday present, and everyone chipped in. And that was nice, but it's like, once I had that, it was kind of like, that's it. This is what I'm doing with my life. I'm playing video games. So
nice.
It's just one of those things that clicked in real early. It was definitely where I liked interacting with things in general, but especially making things move around on the TV was something that I took to real early. And so getting Super Mario Brothers and then eventually stuff like The Legend of Zelda and Mike Tyson's Punch Out, that stuff really clicked into place. Yeah. Like this is something that can be it fits into my brain in a way that really worked really well for me, where I enjoy stories, whether in books or in movies or television. But if I am engaging and able to tell some of my own stories, even if I'm just telling them to myself, that's much more powerful for me.
Yeah, it feels like you have a part in it, right? That's always been the thing for me, is it's more engaging when I'm actually either controlling something or making a decision for myself rather than it being told to me.
Yeah, even when it goes so far beyond not involving actual characters, but just like, hey, this game is supposed to work this way. I'm doing something completely different. I'm just messing around in the sandbox here. That still feels like me taking part in the action on screen. Yeah,
that's really cool. Very similar. So we grew up around the same era, actually. So obviously have seen video games take on a life of their own in today's industry, which we'll touch on. But have you you said it right away, you kind of knew this is what you wanted to kind of partake in going forward. Was there ever a time in your life where video games weren't like right there and you kind of moved away from them, or have they always been front and center for you?
Not really. There's times where you get busier or whatever, and you don't have as much money, and gaming's expensive and stuff like that. But I was always, even throughout all that time, it's not like I was ever moving away from games. I probably might have just retreated to my older games and emulation or whatever for a little bit to play stuff that I could afford or something along those lines. But no, it was always gaming. I never really took a break from it. It helps that it's not just about playing the games, but talking about games with people was a big part of the socialization side of things for me. So even when I wasn't playing a game, I would love to hear what someone else was playing and what they thought of it, and having those conversations and being able to even again, not playing it, I still had a mutual understanding. We spoke the same language, and that stuff was always important to me. So even at a time when I was maybe at my poorest and trying to move out on my own and stuff like that, I was listening to a lot of video game podcasts, and that's when video game podcasts were becoming popular, and getting those conversations into the cracks and crevices of my life where I could fit those conversations in. That really then continued to form my worldview and the way I view video gaming as a whole. Where it's like, this is an opportunity to like, oh, these people are having more and more serious conversations about games. That makes me want to play them even more, and that's kind of the arc I've taken.
Yeah, gotcha. One of the things I've talked to others about that kind of grew up in the era that you were referring to there, where, you know, as you look back at the NES or SNES, Genesis, you know, all those early eras there, when PlayStation first came out in the mid 90s, it feel like a different, it felt like a different thing back then when you compare to now, right? I joke with people around, do you reminisce about the days where gaming was like more of a niche, where you could find someone else who was a gamer and there was an instant kind of click there where you just, you know, you could have a conversation. It's like you automatically became friends before you even knew who this person was. Whereas gaming now, not that I'm saying it's worse, I'm just saying different in that it is so broad and so widely accepted and so global and so many people do it that just being a gamer, if you will, in quotes, doesn't really have that same feel as it used to, at least to me. I don't know. Maybe that's just, you know, me.
Yeah, I think it's I think you're mostly right. I think those clicking into place with someone else can still happen. It's just like you have to you have to find them, right? It's pretty much the same thing. It's just now like you might find another person who's just into games as you are, but they are all in on their one live service game, or they're just playing Final Fantasy 14, and I'm like, well, never played that at all. I don't know what to do with this at all. And so it's like, okay. But then you do find someone who's like has all these similar interests or engage with games the way you've always engaged with games. And it was just like to this day, that would still be like, you know, finding the kid at school that also wanted a Nintendo 64. So yeah, I still find that happening occasionally, but you're right. It's the conversations around gaming are broadening every day more and more and becoming more varied and interesting because of that, thankfully. But it also means that there's a lot of conversations that I wouldn't be able to partake in, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. It's just, yeah, it's like there was a magic about like, oh, it felt like there was the monoculture of video gaming for a while, and that has definitely been broken.
Yeah, no doubt. Monoculture is a good way to put it. Probably because, right, there was nowhere near amount of content there is today. So, you know, there was one big game a year and everyone knew what you were talking about if you were a gamer back then.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very different. So that's cool, man. So I'm always interested with people like yourself. So then what kind of journey did you take to get into the actual gaming industry in terms of being a journalist, right? Like I was looking back, and obviously I know you were at VentureBeat for a long time. But like, take me back to that very beginning. Did you plan to go to school for journalism or video editing, producing, you know, whatever there is path that took you to that first job?
Yeah, I thought school would have been maybe something I could have tried, and it just didn't. I don't know. I was great at taking tests. I never was great at doing homework. And then when it was time to like do the community college thing to find a way to get into actual 4-year university or something like that, I was like, I don't know. I'm just gonna maybe this would work, but it never, like, I never made the effort to actually make all that stuff really happen. So I kind of just found myself posting on the 1UP blogs and making relationships with other people who were slowly leaving. 1up.com, I guess I should clarify for people who don't know. Hey, hang on, kiddo. Sorry, my kid wants something. Hey, no, I'll talk to you in a little bit, okay? The 1up.com was like the website version of EGM and Ziff Davis and all this stuff. And they had these blogs, user blogs, and it was a pretty thriving community. And I would post stuff about my thoughts about games and stuff there a little bit. And I would very occasionally start crossing over with other people who were doing other things, and we would start doing blog series together, and occasionally start recording podcasts together. We were all into the same things because it was all like all the stuff that 1UP was producing. So we had this common ground to touch on, and that was all for fun. It was all for free. It was just a user blog. It was a community thing, and I was always trying to make a job happen in gaming throughout this time, and usually that would be like, someone would have an open position, an associate editor for news or whatever at 1UP or maybe at IGN, and thousands of people would apply for these jobs, and occasionally I think I got maybe one reply once, but most of the time it was like, no, my stuff's just not standing out, and there's a lot of standout people going for these jobs. what happened eventually is One Up collapsed, and because all the like they were cutting jobs, so everyone kind of ended up just leaving on their own because they could see the writing on the wall with print journalism kind of going down the tubes, and that being the thing that was funding everything. Well, everyone else was going to get fired eventually, so they mostly left. And at that time, me and some friends left. We started our own sort of blog thing, and then Dan Shu, who used to run EGM, he was starting BitMob, and he was looking for volunteers. And I was kind of doing the thing where I was like, I found some people that would like let me write for like $200 a month, a couple news stories a week, and whatever. It's just a little bit of experience, you know. There's nothing wrong with that. So I was doing that for a while, but that imploded, and then I'm looking around kind of like, okay, I might not be able to make this work. I'm just going to do my labor tasks that I've been doing to actually make money in day jobs, and I'm going to have to like, just make that be my living. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. So I'd kind of given up, and BitMob was looking for more volunteers, and someone that I had built a relationship with was volunteering at BitMob, and it was all volunteers because that site was not making any money. It's, hey, do you want to come and help us keep some like news up on the site and just do that? I'm like, oh, okay. And that came out of nowhere, and it was just because I made a relationship with someone before, and they thought of my name, and they needed some help, so they came to me. And if that had not happened, nothing else would have ever happened with this job. I think I would have just actually given up and would have moved on to something else. And so I went and did that, and then eventually BitMob got sold to VentureBeat when Dan Shu was like, I actually need a paying job. And so he went to VentureBeat, and he took BitMob with him, basically. Kind of got folded in. Nothing really happened with that side of things. But when Mass Effect 3 was coming out, and the face imports weren't working, and everyone was mad about that, and the story was breaking, and I reached out to him like, Dan, hey, can I write the story for you real quick as freelance and post it up on Gamesbeat under VentureBeat? Yeah. He's like, yeah, sure, do that. I'll get you all sorted in the back and for getting you paid later. But yeah, go ahead and do that. And I wrote the story, and then I just became a regular freelance reporter for Gamesbeat. That eventually turned into my full-time job after a couple of years, where I was like still juggling day jobs for a couple years. And then the rest was just like, hey, eventually it all just kind of worked out. Wow.
It's funny, as many people have I talked to now about their kind of path to the gaming industry, it's never like a straight line, right? It's just like I knew somebody who recommended me, or I wrote something here which got noticed. It's really interesting.
Yeah, if there was one path, it'd be that question would be so easy, but it's all the stuff that might have worked for anyone who's done it before now. Almost none of those things would be replicable. Like, you would not be able to replicate my path into the industry, and I bet that's true for just about everybody. It's like every single time. The things that work are find people who are going in the same direction as you, that want to do the same stuff as you, and have like a similar passion that you have, and put yourself next to them. Find out what they're doing. If everyone just wants to volunteer on a website or a YouTube page or whatever, do that. And as they move ahead, maybe they'll pull you with them. And if you've proved yourself like reliable and someone who knows what they're talking about, they'll remember that. And so it's all just like don't try to force yourself into situations where like, oh, I idolize all these people, I'm going to go be with them. That almost never works out. You got to make the next chance. You got to make your own opportunity by just putting yourself next to people you think might be able to make it too. And if you all work together, maybe most of you will. And that's kind of, that definitely happened with a lot of people at One Up. Me and Mike Minotti, we started on One Up together. We've been doing this stuff together ever since. So that's the way it has. I think it's like the one actionable piece of advice. Just put yourself next to other people who are going the same direction.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I talked to Andrew Reiner a few months ago, from Game Informer, and we had a really good conversation about his path too. And it's always interesting to me. So it's good advice. Good advice. So VentureBeat, we'll get the Giant Bomb, of course, but was your platform for years and years. Yeah. What year was that? You said Mass Effect 3, so I'm blanking out. 2011, 2010?
Yeah, 2011 or 2012 or something like that, in that range. Yes, I can't remember either. That sounds right. Because I was like at VentureBeat, like for my first article, like almost 10 years. So it must have been 2011 to 2022, something like that. Yeah, or sorry, 2011, 2012. Yeah, something in that range.
Gotcha. So, and then Gamesbeat, and how did you were there for a long time. I have to assume that was a good place for you. Did you really enjoy your time there?
You know what it was is that they let me be myself, and that was very important. I've had so many jobs in my life. I worked at FedEx not long after high school, and that was a decent paying job, but it was forced part-time and all this stuff, but I was fine with that at the time because it's like, I'm getting enough to pay my bills or whatever. Yeah. And but I was always late. Because that's the way I'm built, and it's a lot of it is ADHD and all these other things. Once I'm there working, I'll work hard, but I have a hard time like initiating into the situation. So Gamesbeat enabled me to be like sort of not like, we're not gonna have someone above you monitoring, are you getting there on time, and are you doing all these things that don't really matter to the output. We're just gonna focus on the output. Like what do the results look like? And the results always looked pretty good. After a few years, even like when I was just a freelancer still, or contract employee eventually at Gamesbeat before I went full time. A lot of my stories would help me become like one of the most read writers on the site. And so it's like, if you just focus on that side of stuff, it doesn't really matter when and how and all this stuff, how this stuff is getting done. And I'm like, that would be my argument. And they bought that. They're like, just let Jeff be Jeff, and everything else will sort of figure itself out. And that, like, finding an employer like that was I feel very lucky that I fell into that position and had editors that embraced and encouraged that. And so, yeah, it did feel like a very nice place and one that treated me with respect for a very long time. So, it was also a place that like didn't do a ton with investing in our like growth as the game side. So it's like that's where like some frustrations came in, but it let us kind of just write our stories how we wanted. And, you can kind of go back and look at some of the stuff I wrote there. It's like, this is supposed to be a business focused news site, and they're just writing all kinds of nonsense. And it's like, yeah, we kind of got away with a lot, and I appreciated that.
That's cool. And I mean, we'll touch on it more, but I think that's, it's incredibly important, I think, when you compare it to how kind of gaming coverage is done today too. It seems to be, if you look back, well, obviously even to the 90s, of course, but I mean, even if you look back just to the early 2000s, or even at your initial time at VentureBeat in the early 2010s, it's so drastically different from now on how, social media has completely changed game coverage and YouTube and streaming and all these different things. But I mean, when you look back at that era, right, when you go to print magazines and it's starting to move to websites, and as you said, forums became a big thing for a while, still are to some degree, and these types of things, like, did you find it hard to kind of evolve your approach over the past 10, 15 years as to how you think about gaming coverage and what you're going to write about or talk about?
Yeah, a little bit. It's a lot of those were situations like, you do get used to doing things one way, but other were like weird circumstances of eventually I start doing a lot of my own reporting and trying to get stuff out there before anyone else, and saying, hey, if I'm writing this down in a story, then it's confirmed. And then you realize, well, it would be nice to be able to like do a more comprehensive news site where we are just writing every single thing that people are talking about out there. And then that creates a problem, because it's like, if Jeff Grubb writes it in a story, then he must know. And I'm like, no, I actually just want to like talk about things that people are talking about. So I'm like, I got in this weird situation of wanting to be like, hey, I want GameSpeak to be a site where you can go there and every piece of news you might need to know for the day, whether it's fully confirmed or just a rumor, you can come here and get it. And I'm like, but I would have to be contributing a lot to that. And again, if I wrote the byline, people, or if it was my byline, people be like, okay, well, Jeff Grubb's writing it, so he knows more than what he's actually saying there. And then that creates this weird situation where it's like, but you wrote it in a story, why did you say that? You lied. I'm like, no, I swear I said in the story I didn't know for sure. And so it's like, I had trouble figuring out how to adapt to that. Now, I have figured that out now, moving on to like stuff like Game Mess Mornings, where I can have conversation about these things, and that's freed me up. But it's like I never quite cracked that nut with me writing for a website, trying to figure that out. So yeah, it's and really maybe the answer was Twitter and social media, being like, hey, we can have these conversations on Twitter, and I can put stuff out there and ask questions or lead the conversation, but that's not the job. It's an important tool for the job, but no one was ever paying me to tweet. So that was not exactly cracking the nut. If I was to start over from the beginning and saying I have to start a Patreon or whatever, or I was going to start a new media company going to focus on games coverage, I probably would find a way to try to like say, hey, like support us on Patreon. We're going to put a lot of stuff out on Twitter. And yeah, the tweets will be for free, but if you want to have the deeper conversations, maybe that stuff can happen on videos that you'll get first and stuff like that. I would probably be like, we are gonna just go to where people are reading about game news anyhow, which is mostly social media. So we'll just do most of our work there, and then we'll find ways to build on that coverage elsewhere in more interesting ways. But it was not something that was easy to figure out when you were working backwards from, well, Gamesbeat does stories on a website. How do you make that work? We didn't quite figure that out.
Yeah. Oh, and you're certainly not alone, right? I think that that's been a tough thing to kind of conquer for a while now for many sites. And we've seen them come and go for that reason. So you mentioned what do you call it? Game Mess Decides, which is your podcast. You mentioned that you've been working with Mike Manani for a very long time now. Weekly show. As you make this transition to what you just kind of referenced, which is, you know, how you kind of give the more in-depth thing, you know, do you see the podcast avenue as kind of one of your most enjoyable ways to do that? It feels like the conversation between you and Mike is not only natural and fluid, right? But it's there's no kind of prohibitive angle on it, right? You can just talk about the games and the stuff, you know. And I know for me, like with our big cast that we do every Sunday, that's how I feel. It's just like you can just talk, you know. It doesn't have to fit in a certain thing. It doesn't have how many words you say, you know, all this. You could just talk about whatever is the hot thing or what you want to discuss, and it feels kind of freeing in that sense.
Yeah, it's definitely something I've appreciated having even before we had a lot of listeners, and now, you know, we have more now, and that's nice, and it's cool to have an active community. But really what we are always doing it for was, the opportunity to have these conversations without feeling boxed in of like, you know, you got to do the who, what, where, why, when, and how, and then maybe you can add a little bit of flavor in there somewhere. It's like, no, this is all flavor. And even if we like leave behind the topic of conversation very quickly and then go on some offshoot, you know, most of the people are going to be here for that. That's nice. It is freeing, and it provides us a way of like building a longer term sort of meta conversation around all of games as we sort of you know, come up with concepts that we want to talk about, and then we see how the games reflect that. They're coming out and be like, okay, they're trying this thing and it is working. What's going to happen next? And it's like having this ongoing conversation when it feels like I was always doing that with the medium itself. I was always like, felt like I was in a conversation with games, and we were going back and forth, and games were changing and I was changing, and it was cool to have that. But now it's very cool to share that with Mike and then the audience, because it's like we're all part of this ever-changing medium that is it changes faster than most other forms of art, and that's what makes it so fun to talk about.
Yeah, I completely agree. So you mentioned too, or you didn't mention, but I mean, we know recently that you made the move to Giant Bomb. So how do you feel that, I mean, for your own words, how has that gone for you? Has it been good? Are you still enjoying it to the same level that you know, that you had previously?
Yes, I am. It's been a nice change because, you know, it was I really loved Gamesbeat. It was 10 years of that though, and it was but it was time for a change in terms of thinking about how I'm going to be presenting myself and how I want to engage with this coverage. And writing about games, one of the hardest things about that is like whenever you're not writing about games, you feel guilty, and that includes like playing games. And with Giant Bomb, one of the treasures is I can sit around with, you know, in the Discord with everyone else, and we can come up with an idea for a fun new way to play a game that we all love or one that we haven't tried before. And within an hour, we could be up, set up on the site, streaming out, and be having the time of our lives, just like, you know, joking around doing this thing. And it sometimes works great, sometimes it doesn't. And then sometimes, you know, the Queen of Great Britain dies in the middle of a Sonic 06 stream, and you're like breaking the news, and then you have Sonic dabbing or whatever, and it's like, oh, I'm going to remember this for the rest of my life. And that is a very nice way to engage with, like, again, with the community and with games, where it's like, it's not just about the stories I'm telling myself when I'm playing games. It's about just like having this cool atmosphere of there is silly stuff happening on the screen, and it enables us to bounce off of other humans and create these memorable moments. And I love that stuff. And then I could do a daily news show at the same time, and we can have these serious conversations about the way the business is working and why things happen the way they happen, which is some of my favorite stuff to do. It's I spend a lot of time trying to understand why games, the business of games works the way it works. Yeah. And I feel very lucky that I have a platform where I could share some of those insights while also asking questions and knowing that if I kind of put it out there, we're going to figure out an answer. I'll be able to get a guest on the show can help me figure it out, or someone will reach out to me and be like, hey, this is what's happening at this company, and all that stuff that you keep like pointing out, like, this is weird, here's why. And I feel very lucky that it works that way for me.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. That's again, I don't think that's kind of an opportunity for many who work in the gaming space to have that freedom. I know you've mentioned a few times now around how you interact with the community and stuff. So that's great. It's great to hear. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about and just get your perspective on it. I know you talk about this a lot, so I don't, some of this may be kind of rehashed for you, I'm sure, but it's fair to say, I think that, you've gained a pretty big reputation, I think, over the years, obviously. But you have a reputation, I know, among the gaming community now as someone who, whatever word you want to throw out there, an insider, all those words that get thrown around. And so, it's pretty apparent that obviously, as you were kind of alluding to earlier, right, building relationships, knowing people in the industry, and just having that time to do that. How do you feel like, is that weird to you? Is it like, do you enjoy it? Is it both? Like, what do you feel about having this reputation as someone who people go to say, we've heard rumblings of this game coming down the line. Well, what's Jeff Grubb say? What's he saying? And
it's weird.
There's probably a handful of people that those names get thrown out, but you're absolutely one of them. And I got to imagine, just as someone who obviously way smaller the community than you, but as someone who, does get reached out to once in a while, I can't imagine the number of people that are hitting you up to be like, hey, is this real? What have you heard about this? You know what I mean? It seems weird to me.
It is. It's definitely strange. There's I've never really, it's never really clicked to me that like that's how some people view me. I don't think of myself that way. So it's like, oh yeah, whenever I get reminded of it, I'm like, oh yeah, there is that thing. Oh yeah, weird. And so, but it's also like something we've definitely tried to leverage, and I've tried to whenever you get a break in life, you try to turn it to your advantage and sort of like say, hey, can I be able to afford a house based on this stuff? And it's definitely helped with that sort of thing. But it's also, there's a lot of pressure with it where you got to get everything right. You get one thing wrong, that's what people remember. People never forget the Xbox Live Gold thing, even though it is still going to happen. People don't believe me when I try to explain to them, like, it's just been on their docket. It hasn't happened yet. I promise you it will happen. I promise you it will still be the thing they planned this entire time. But because I said it so long ago, people will hold it against me forever. And even once it does happen, it won't matter. I won't get the credit for it. But whatever, like, that's part of the job. And so there's a lot of stress with that. I'm definitely feeling it right now with this goddamn Nintendo Direct, where I'm like, yeah, I'm like, I mostly just wanted to confirm the date, but then we got so far out over our skis with like the Zelda stuff, and listen, I'm pretty sure about most of the stuff we've heard, and I know for a fact we've heard it from pretty good sources, but that doesn't mean things are like, it's Nintendo, and Nintendo pulls weird last minute things all the time, and so it's like, I spend my weekend, I go to the zoo and I'm having a great time, and then it's like, it washes over me with like, oh man, by Tuesday, my replies could just be full of people calling me an asshole, saying, "Oh, look at all this stuff you got wrong." And if I get it right, all the people who have been saying I'm going to get it wrong this entire time are not going to come and apologize.
You'll never hear from them again.
Never hear from them again. So it's like, why do I do this to myself? And the answer is I try to avoid this particular situation more and more. And this time I just messed up and kind of, I just blundered myself back here again. So in the future, I try I'm just going to talk about what I know 100%. And everything else will just like step back and just focus on that stuff, and I'll put everything else in vagaries. But so yeah, it's a lot of stress, and it's weird to be like to know that like so many people have so much passion, and they when your name comes up, they have an opinion about it. That's like something that I've just never been able to process very well. I have a very like out of sight, out of mind mentality towards most things, and so when I leave this computer and I go upstairs, all that stuff evaporates from my brain. So it's hard to like, come back downstairs and like engage. Oh, okay. Where do we leave off? What is everyone thinking about the last thing I said? I'm like, I don't even remember the last thing I said. So Like, you have to remind me when you're coming to yell at me about something. But at the same time, I do recognize that it's most of this stuff is kind of a privilege. I feel lucky to be a person that people come to with information. I felt like I've had a pretty strong take on why I do what I do, where I'm like, I want to be the person who can explain from one side to the other, like, why, hey, gamers, this is why publishers behave this way, and why developers behave this way. And then kind of speaking the other way, hey, developers, publishers, this is why gamers feel that way and feel this way. And part of that is understanding like what is going to happen next, and getting leaks and understanding what developers and publishers are working on, and being like, and here's why they're doing that. And when I talk about leaks, a lot of times it is in that context of, hey, EA is making a Dead Space game, everybody, and they are gonna, and here's why they're doing it, because they've seen success over at Capcom with Resident Evil, and Jedi Fallen Order did really well. So yeah, the bottom line shows that the investing in this stuff works for them, and so they're going to do more of it. And then of course most people just get the information secondhand, and are like, oh, Jeff Grubb says Dead Space, and that's all they take away. And that's, you know what, that's fine. I get that that's going to happen. But I know that when the people actually end up coming to me, they're going to get more information, and I can only control that. So I try to control what I can control and leave everything else sort of out of my mind as best I can. Right now, though, the direct stuff, it's getting to me. I'm like, oh, I got to learn your lesson, Jeff, for once and for all.
It's got to be, it's funny, though. You got to imagine it's tough, or I imagine it's tough, because, even with the smaller audience I've gained, right? If I make a statement about anything that is ends up being wrong, or there's always someone that's listening and waiting to pounce, if you will, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And so as your reputation gets bigger, and you start to become known as a source, like you have for certain things, as there's just people chomping at the bit to try and make you look wrong or make you look bad, and it's just, which is weird in and of itself, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it is weird that there are people who care that much. And I don't fully understand that. I mean, I get that there were people really mad about the Elden Ring stuff, and that community is very passionate. So when I got the Elden Ring stuff, I'm like, you know what? Actually, I get this, guys. I just blew that, and let's talk about it as best we can. But if you're gonna come to me and be mad and say I don't know shit about From, you know what? You're right. You're absolutely right. And what can I do about that other than say you're right? It's just like I think some people specifically want me to be wrong because they think I talk too much about Xbox stuff, and they're like, well, so you must be an Xbox fan. I'm like, listen, man, I like my Steam Deck. I don't really think about consoles all that much beyond that. Like, leave me alone, leave me out of this. But it's like, no, you must prefer, like, you give people on the Xbox side of things to talk about, so you must hate PlayStation. I'm like, I just don't have that great a Sony source. They're really locked down. Every time I try to look into it, they're like, yeah, if I tell anything about Sony, they will fucking cut us off. So I'm like, okay, all right, well, listen, I don't want to take a risk with anyone's job, so you don't have to tell me anything. So that side of stuff is weird, where it's like, it's just fanboys imagining a person that I am not and getting mad at that thing. And I do not know what to do with that, other than usually just block, most of the time laugh, and then occasionally take their money if they're sending me super chats. Like, yeah, all right, yeah, I'll take your money, fine.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing else you can do with it, right? I mean,
exactly.
That's the nature of it. People, yeah, I completely understand. The other thing you touched on there, which I found interesting, which I wasn't really thinking about until you mentioned it, was around kind of this dialogue between developers / publishers and gamers today. And that line, that line used to not even exist, right? I mean, it used to be a game would release and you'd play it, and if you didn't like it, oh well, it doesn't matter. Now it's so close, and we've even seen more recently. I'm a big Halo fan. It's my favorite franchise. I've played it my entire life, since it came out. And Halo Infinite, as you're well aware, right, and 343 in general have been under fire. And so that community is just at war right now with everything going on with that game, and that happens to many games and franchises right now. But I think that your description of how you attempt to I don't know the right word here, maybe translate, maybe kind of be a liaison between what's going on one side and going on the other, I think is not only important, but I think it's underappreciated in today's industry, because there are every day, and I know you see this obviously, is there's gamers, there are the gamers out there who talk about things so broadly and really have no idea of how a game gets made, how publishing worked, how these companies were, anything. And then you have developers who, even though it may not look like it, they're really trying to communicate with their audience and trying to let people know what's going on. And that's faltering for maybe no fault of their own. There's all kinds of politics involved in that, as you know. So having people who can kind of bridge that gap is, I think, an underappreciated, thing in the gaming industry, the social space right now. And I think to your point, you're one of those people that attempts to do that and does it pretty well from what I've seen. So one, I would say applaud you on that. But two, I think that's tough, man. That's not something that day to day is an easy thing to just do, because no matter what you say, even if it's 100% factual, and it's factual because you have the sources or info to back it up, and to explain why certain things happen, people aren't going to believe you all the time, or they're going to think you're making it up or being pro brand.
Like we were talking about the story with what's the Dead Space clone that's coming out, Calypso Protocol, and that studio, and the studio leader there was talking about
Glenn Schofield.
Glenn Schofield, thank you, was talking about, we're going to be basically saying, I'm crunching, and that's awesome. This is what games is all about, and that's in so many words what he said, and you got a lot of criticism for it. And I was talking about it on one of my shows, and just being like, you cannot say this as someone who's in charge of a studio, and you cannot, because this is exactly the kind of thing where if you hear this as someone who works for that guy, you are going to assume you have got to meet his expectations for what hard work looks like. And I was, I went off about how at our work, we work late nights sometimes. We would, I say, occasionally crunch on projects and things like that, especially around times like E3 or whatever. That happens. But my boss is always like, okay, go home. You're done. Get out of here. Go. You're done. No more working. If you see me working on the weekend, no, stop. Like, that is what I hear most commonly from him. But I get wanting to work hard. And it was like that was almost the extent of the conversation. And it was like, why are you apologizing for someone who's who's going to cause a crunch environment? I'm like, listen, I'm just trying to be empathetic to everybody and understand their point of view, because that enables me to then explain the other side, like what people are thinking. And in no way we ever excuse someone trying to be. In fact, we specifically called it out and say you cannot do this. But people want to hear what they want to hear a lot of times, and you kind of can't let that ever affect you. Now, I'll say, luckily for me, I'm usually not thinking about the people criticizing what I'm about to say before I say it. So all the stuff just comes out how I intend it, luckily. Maybe that's a character flaw, but it's one that has worked out in my favor for the most part. But yeah, you'll get a lot of people who want to hear what they want to hear, and when they don't, they'll get mad. And I feel like, well, we can have a conversation about that. We could still, I want to be in a position, I am, at my heart, I'm a critic. And no matter what part of the job I'm partaking in, even when I'm not reviewing a game, when we are covering news and we are talking about the way a company behaves, I am trying to criticize their way of doing business and in a way that we can find the flaws, and maybe one day someone will hear this and they'll improve. It's the critical method. And so if I'm going to be out there doing that all the time, when people come to me with criticisms of the way I'm doing things, I mostly just want to be like, you need to have a space where you can criticize me, and that should be okay. And I do want to hear it. It is just occasionally picking out the little freaks who are obviously just little fanboys who are going to scream nonsense at you. Just throw them out, block them immediately, and try to find the person who has a point of honest contention that they want to bring up. And those people, usually when you start having a conversation with them, are going to listen and hear you out. And in the end, they might still be mad at you, but you could tell that they're at least grateful that you had the conversation, or were open to being criticized. I think a big problem we have on the games journalism side, and now kind of extending to YouTube, is getting any sort of criticism. It all kind of melds together into this is probably just coming from one of those little freaks. And really, sometimes there is an occasional person that is just trying to say, hey, the way you're doing things, it could be better. And if you hear them out, usually you could do something better in the future, or at least you can it can help inform you when you make a decision in the future about how you're going to do things, to think about that criticism. And I think that's key. It can really help to make sure that more and more people are feeling included.
Yeah, no, very fair points. I think that's a byproduct maybe of just in general people wanting things to be black and white, when in fact, a lot of it is in the gray, right? There's a lot of context and nuance to
so much nuance,
to these conversations. And if you're someone who just says, no, it has to be this way, or it has to be this way, you're probably missing the point in between there. But I think you're right. I think there's the sad thing is, I think there's more room for the conversations you're referring to than we realize, but there's so much that kind of gets bubbled to the top from the loudest, of the ones we're talking about, you just get rid of, that we sometimes miss it. In fact, I had an interaction. I was on Defining Duke with Maddie and Cog and the guys this week, talking about Halo, funny enough, and Chris Raygun. I was new there, and people didn't really know me in terms of the Halo community, and I got some criticism, as you would expect, but one person reached out to me in DMs on Twitter, and he just said, hey, you were talking about this and I don't think that's right, and kind of question. I said, well, it's hard to provide context and nuance sometimes when you're on a show and under just
definitely
people listening to you, like, every word, right? And I said, but here's what I meant. And I kind of typed it out, and he responded, and he's just like, oh, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. We went back and forth. Now we follow each other on Twitter, and there's someone new in the gaming community that I've met I never knew before. And kind of mutual respect gained from just talking about this thing that, that came up, instead of just saying, no, you're wrong, you're an idiot, and, blasting at someone.
Yeah, so. I think it's people default to getting mad that at someone who is displaying an opinion that was almost not necessarily formed exclusively in a vacuum by that person. What I mean by that is we all exist under these systems that we had no one partook in the process where we decided we are going to live under, capitalism or any other system like that. And yet we have to deal with the ramifications of that every day. And I always work backward from that. I'm like, most of the time people are just trying to figure out how to eat. And because of that, they make decisions that it's the path of least resistance. And sometimes that causes them to do things that maybe treats people unfairly or creates a situation where a game is bad. And maybe before I rush in at yelling at someone for doing something I dislike, let's examine the system that created these symptoms. And that's, I feel much better about that, because it's like, I know that I'm guilty of so many of these things, and I don't feel responsible for those things at the same time. What happened there? Well, what choice did I have? What choice do any of us have? So while we can criticize and we can point these things out, when we go to lay down the blame, I tend to want to put it on the system rather than on the individual.
Yeah, I think that's fair too. I think many situations would point to that, right? So yeah, I think that's fair enough. So we've one of the other things I wanted to ask you is around just the industry in itself. So I have a lot of conversations, because the reason I really enjoyed covering the gaming industry so much is, I think you said earlier, it's just constantly changing and evolving, right? And it's always it's in a nonstop, and I think it's one of the fastest kind of evolving industries in that space, especially in the media space. And to me, that's fascinating. And one of the things I've talked about, more recently is around globalization and new development coming in from China and India, South Korea, all these other companies that are kind of really starting to thrive, and gaming's just branching out unlike anything we've ever seen. And that really excites me. And then on the counterpoint, there's some people I speak to who kind of look at gaming today as, well, everything's live service and everything has monetization and everything's got DLC and paid stuff, and they're kind of more negative about it. You know what I mean? Where do you kind of see the industry on that? Are you kind of in between, or how do you feel about gaming itself in 2022?
Yeah, I feel like it has not found this equilibrium that I think people wanted it to find, as consoles were the dominant way of buying and engaging with the medium. So we started off with arcade games, and those games were definitely manipulative and trying to get you to spend as much money as possible. I got the Simpsons arcade 1-up machine, which I love, but there's no playing that game without taking damage. It's built to hurt you so that your life goes down at a certain rate, so you have to spend a certain amount of money to beat that game. And that was manipulative from the start, and we sort of moved away from that as things went home. And the ledger sort of started coming back in our favor as customers, of being like, we were getting more for our money as long as we were willing to spend quite a bit up front. We would get more for our money because these games would have to get bigger and compete with each other and compete for our limited budget. And so they were trying to be bigger and brighter and better in all these different ways. And that worked for a very long time. And I think a lot of people expected that it would work that way for forever. But the industry changed, because it's software plus art, and you could do so much with that. And not only that, software plus art plus the internet plus networking. And when you combine these three factors, it's sort of like an endless like this hydra that can have so many different heads. And eventually, of course, we were going to get mobile games that are cheap to manufacture, and if one hits, they have like a ceiling for making money that is off the charts. And of course, we were going to get that stuff, and here we are. And I'll say, like, people should be kind of a little bit more grateful. I don't want to be like, just quit your whining or anything like that. Keep criticizing stuff you don't like. Absolutely criticize things you don't like. But in 2011, 2012, going into the next generation of consoles back then, people were predicting mobile was going to kill console gaming. And everyone can say, we'll laugh at that. Of course, that was stupid. But the reason people thought that is because console gaming did that to the arcades. And so the assumption is, like, if a business found a way to make more money with less risk, they would all go into that market and leave the old one behind. And that's what happened with console gaming versus arcade gaming. So maybe the same thing was going to happen with mobile gaming versus consoles. And the equilibrium we did find was, no, there is an audience that just wants to game in that one specific way, and it is big enough and lucrative enough, and we spend enough money as consumers that it justifies going on and really growing, which it has done since then. And so I'm pretty grateful that it feels like we are in a situation where as the industry does create new methods of using games to make money, which is what it all comes down to. They're just finding new ways to use games to make money. We're not crossing off old ways of doing that. We are adding things. And so while I do find many live service games to be kind of, they repulse me away, like they push me away, where I'm like, this is not how, I don't want to be thinking about my wallet too much when I'm playing a game. And some of these things, it's what happened with me playing Hearthstone. I was really enjoying Hearthstone. And then I saw through the matrix of like, oh, here's how the game is trying to link itself directly into my wallet as it keeps me on this treadmill, and I got to stop playing. I stopped enjoying it because I saw through that. And so, like, I want the games where I could just play them without having to think about those things. And thankfully, they still exist, and we are moving in a way where a company like EA, which was like one of the first and biggest saying, we're going to go all live service, and we believe in live service completely, has begun stepping back from that and saying, hey, we've had some success with single player games like Jedi Fallen Order. Maybe we can keep doing this and invest in these things even more while also doing the live service games. And I think if this is the sort of come to Jesus moment that EA is having, and if EA could do it, all other publishers are probably going to realize it too. Then therefore, I think we're going to be okay, and I don't have to feel too bad about these kinds of games that I don't engage with so much, taking things away from that I like. We should keep getting both. And even then, on top of that, because we spend so much money as traditional console, PC games or whatever, they are trying to get us over on the live service games. They're trying to make ones that appeal to us more and more, and those will keep getting better. And then, so you do fall in one. People have fallen into Final Fantasy 14 or Fortnite or whatever, and they spend a lot of time, Call of Duty Warzone. People do spend a lot of times in these games because those games have tried to appeal to that audience. And, if you find one you like and you're not too offended by it, it's like you could still have that and still have all your old games. And they're never going to make as many single player games as they were during the PS2 or PS3 era even. But we are still getting more than what people thought we were going to get when we were going into the Xbox One and PlayStation 4, when Microsoft and Sony were building those consoles, and they're like, we got to save as much money as possible because it could be the last generation because no one's going to buy these things. And so they gave us a couple pieces of junk, really, the PS4 and the Xbox One, and weren't investing in a lot of games. And then they both sold pretty well. The PS4 especially sold it really, really well. And then a couple years later, games started coming out because they realized at that point, once it started selling well, we can invest in these games again. Yep. And so just that whole through line there, it's like, we are going to be okay. You don't have to like rage against things you don't like. Although, of course, again, I give you full permission to do so if you want to.
Yeah. I think it's funny because it's like it's like this constant tug of war between the consumer and the publisher, right? And we've been, when things go too far in one direction, the gamers get extremely vocal and have shown the social space, if to any of its credit, is one of those things that does allow us. That's when it's being used well, right? Is to vocally push back on things that may be a little more egregious. As soon as you were talking about kind of you mentioned Hearthstone, what popped into mind more recently was like Diablo Immortal, right? Like the community let Blizzard know this isn't us. Like you've got the wrong thing going here. So, you know, I have to assume they're probably reevaluating as we speak around how some of those things were approached. But to your point, I think the gaming industry is so big now. There's so many developers and so many games that, like you said, if you still are a fan of that kind of, for lack of a better word, traditional experience, those are still there. It's just that there's all these other products if you want them as well.
Exactly.
Like I was playing, you mentioned the Steam Deck, which made me think I flew out to Washington State a couple weeks ago. I was flying home, had my Steam Deck, and I was playing Disco Elysium on the flight home. And I'm like thinking to myself, I'm playing like a AAA RPG sitting here on the plane with a fantastic screen. Like Steam Deck's awesome. And, you know, headphones. And I'm like, this is just incredible. You know what I mean? Like, this is amazing. Gaming's great.
Yeah. I think we're in a really good time for gaming. Everyone fully believes in their hardware that they're making. Everyone fully believes that they have a future in this business, creating traditional style games. And some of them are also trying live service games, but they are not abandoning their own old way of doing things at all. And so we're just gonna get this smorgasbord of options, and really, like, stuff like the Steam Deck is just going to create even more ways to engage with the stuff while also creating more competition. And it's we're in a really strong time for gaming. And I hope that some of the maybe stagnation that happened on the last generation because the hardware wasn't quite up to snuff. I hope that as we get further and further into this generation, we see some of that rust shake off and we see some really brilliant new ideas. I feel like we probably are on the cusp of, you know, games that take advantage of these super powerful CPUs and do great stuff with simulation and things like that. You know, but right now we are well primed for that. People have shown that they'll spend a lot of money on a game that feels like it's doing something new with Elden Ring, things like that. So let's keep at it, and hopefully we we can come back to a conversation like this, you know, 5-10 years from now and talk about how, man, wasn't that a golden era the last 5 to 10 years? It really feels like we are like right there for something like that.
Yeah, no doubt. And I agree with you, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see the next 3 to 5 years. I'm really paying attention for that reason, right? You have the PS5 and the Series X are far more advanced consoles in their time, as you said, than the Xbox One, PS4 are. You've got the new NVIDIA and AMD hardware coming, and I did a video recently about some of that technology and what that can mean for games. And it's a really exciting era for sure. Give me I'll put you on the spot for one question on a game. What's your most anticipated game right now? What are you really looking forward to if you could pick one?
Yeah, I really do want to play Metroid Prime again. That remaster, I guess, that Nintendo still hasn't announced yet, but it should be coming this holiday. Okay. That would be. I kind of just want everyone to talk about Metroid Prime again. But then after that, I mean, it honestly is Breath of the Wild 2. For a while, it was like I was putting that game out of my head because it's like, who knows when I'm gonna get a chance to play that. But it feels like it's okay to expect it within like the next year again. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to begin looking forward to that, and I'm ready to see what took them so long. You know, the big thing was like they are going to make a sequel to Breath of the Wild, which should mean they should be able to reuse a lot of assets, and that means they should be able to make the game pretty quickly. And yet, this has been the longest gap between a major or a mainline Zelda game ever. So what happened? What were the big ideas that they stumbled across in the middle of development that made them say, "Hey, we need more time so that we can make this the best it could possibly be"? I got to see that after being so blown away by Breath of the Wild and being in a post Elden Ring world and stuff like that. I want to see what if they feel they can push the envelope forward. So yeah, Breath of the Wild 2 hopefully by the latest at summer of next year. That would be great.
Nice. Yeah, Nintendo, I mean, anytime I feel like I talking about Nintendo, it's like talking about something wholly unique. Like just their approach to nearly everything is unique. And I was looking at recently around like their kind of forecast, their fiscal forecast. I get into numbers, I'm a geek with that stuff. And they're actually forecasting like a downturn into next year, which is, you know, PlayStation and Xbox are both forecasting continued growth. And I'm thinking, well, you know, is that a game release schedule? Is that they're on the tail end of their hardware and they're going to be reinvesting, you know, revenue or some of their profits into new development for new hardware or whatever the Switch 2 or Pro or whatever, you know, comes next. But just very curious to see what Nintendo does over the, say, next 18 months or so, because the Switch is long in the tooth at this point. Even though, you know, we know it sells its sales and the game.
Yeah, it should still sell like 20 million this fiscal year, which is massive for how late it is in its life. So Yeah, it's an unmitigated, massive success. It's time for them to start looking forward, though. So yeah, it's get like, this Direct's going to be coming up on Tuesday. I don't know when you post this, but like as we're talking, it's coming up on probably this Tuesday, Wednesday, this next week sometime, and it feels like this is going to be the biggest blowout before they have to start recognizing that every Direct going forward is going to have the specter of a next Switch hanging over it, of people expecting that at any time. Right now, most people are like, no, I'm not expecting right now. Next year, it's going to be all year talking about the follow-up to the Switch. So let's get this Direct out of the way, and then we could start having those conversations, and then whatever that's going to look like, we have no idea. So it's going to take some time to see it, but it's going to be an interesting time because I think Nintendo's going to try to really figure out a new way of moving from one generation to the next. And I'm waiting to see what that's actually going to manifest as.
No doubt. They've always, even when they've gotten it wrong, they've done something unique, generally speaking.
Yes.
And they've had huge hits and they've had, surprising losses. Wii U was like a template for what the Switch, where they wanted to go, as we know. But I think since they merged the market of the DS and the console, right, with the Switch, like that's, I got to say that's their future now, right? Like they have to figure out how to continue to evolve that, whatever that looks like, which is interesting.
Exactly.
And does the Steam Deck, have any influence on that too? But anyway, Jeff, man, it's been an absolute blast talking to you today, man. I appreciate you taking the time. I want to go ahead and wrap up, but I wanted to just ask you, anything in terms of what you're doing over at Giant Bomb or on your podcast, or any just a project you're working on you want to shout out or call out before we head out?
Game Mess mornings every morning except for Tuesdays. 11 a.m. Eastern. We go on twitch.tv/giantbomb. And we talk about the news, and it's been fantastic. I have a different guest on every day, and they come on, and everyone always has so much interesting things to say about like what is going on and what might happen next. And it's been a real fantastic way for me to like, oh yeah, I can completely keep up with the news on my show here, and we can have great conversations. And it's just kind of a cool way to start your day if you are looking for something to put in your rotation. Where I do want to keep up with the news. It's about an hour long. We try to put as much news in the first half an hour, and then we kind of shoot the shit in the second half or whatever. So if you want to just get the news that first half an hour each day, it's very handy for that. But it is conversational, and it's going to be about what we think is going to happen. So there's a lot more to it than just the headlines. And then we do some streams usually after Game Best mornings each weekday. So I've been playing Xenoblade Chronicles 3, a game I never thought I would have played because the audience is like keeping me going in that game. That's been fun. And then we're doing stuff like Sonic 06 and Dan's playing through that, and I'm just sitting on the couch behind him while he's playing that. And that last stream was a real wild one. I guess if there's anything I could point you at, go to giantbomb.com right now and go look up the last video of Sonic that we played of Sonic 06. Just watch that whole thing and watch this complete mess unfold before your eyes. It was a real good time. So yeah, lots of fun stuff happening on Giant Bomb, and lots more fun stuff will be happening. We are beginning to tease. We're going to be doing a thing in October in person, so looking forward to that. And then, then Game of the Year. So it's all happening over at Giant Bomb right now.
Nice, man. Glad to hear it's going well for you. Glad to hear that all worked out. And yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure to get all the links to everything in the description here. So that's about it, man. Thank you again for taking the time. I hope that you had a good time hanging out.
I had a great time. Thank you so much, man.
Of course. And yeah, I'll definitely be in touch. And for now, that is thank you to all of our Season Gaming patrons who'll be checking this out, and anyone who checks it out after its exclusivity period. Appreciate you. And thanks for hanging out with us at Season Gaming. But until next time, take care.